He's been involved in Marvin as a housing agency, working in a housing agency in the state and as a banker. Diana is a healthcare professional. Me as a developer for the last 35 years with my own company. And Gizmo, my other partner who's not here, an investment banker. And what we do is, what we call it is restorative human settlement. What we believe is that every developer that builds something starts out with a point of view. Otherwise, communities don't get what they need. And so our point of view is that people don't live in buildings, people live in communities. So our work is geared toward making stronger communities. And we developed some principles over the last 30 years about what does it take to make stronger communities, whether you're working here in New York, or whether you're working in Rwanda, or in South Africa, or in India, or Senegal, or in Birmingham, and we've worked all over doing this. And our work is always in communities that have been ignored and disinvested, right? They've been ignored and disinvested by the capital markets. They've been ignored and disinvested by people who make investments, and they make investments that don't build stronger communities. So our work is geared toward building stronger communities, and our first thing is, we start to observe, and our first comment is we want to do no harm. You know, now medical professionals say do no harm, but in this sort of business you have to think the same way, because the investments you make will last for 40, 50, 60, 70 years, and they will have impacts on people for a long time. So we have these principles, which I'm not going to go through. We'll eventually leave you one of these presentations, but fundamentally it's trying to figure out how do you create benefit for all. There's this fundamental belief that I have about the universe, right, that is divided into two pieces, right? There's one group that believes there's not enough resources to go around, and they have to hoard those resources, and they take things they never give. And there's another group, which I belong to, that believes that God created enough resources to go around. We just have to figure out more effective ways to share and utilize those resources, right? And that point of view sort of directs everything we do as developers. All developers don't take that standpoint, but that's the one we take. And that's what you see in the chart. Next slide. And so this is just some pictures of some things where we've worked before, and the process is always the same. The first thing we do is listen to what people have to say and try to understand what the issues are. Next slide. And so this is work we did in Rwanda 8 years after the genocide. And Rwanda is a place where there weren't raw materials. Most of the men were dead or missing, still in the military. And we worked with women's cooperatives to teach them to build. So the first thing we did, you know, you say you don't want to build for people, you want to help people to build for themselves. So we helped them build a brick factory, right? They built a brick factory, they made the bricks there on site, then they built buildings. They built healthcare buildings, educational facilities, homes, etc. They built a farm. They built an organic farm, because what we did is we built anaerobic digesters that took farm waste and turned it into fuel, methane. And they cooked with that. And then the byproduct was organic fertilizer. And now they feed themselves, they clothe themselves, and they're in the economy, right? And that's what I say. We didn't build buildings, we built a community. Our work is about community building. Next slide, please. And this is Harlem. We started working in Harlem. In 1988, you know. And in 1988, people always said, oh, Harlem is a disaster zone, no one wants to live there, blah, blah, blah. There is more vacant land and empty buildings, etc. And people said, this is hopeless, and it will never, ever change, right? And so we started, we did several projects, but we started working on a corridor, the 116th Street corridor. And the reason that we liked that corridor, it was called River to River 116th Street. And what we did is we worked with the city to rezone, and then over the course of a summer, after coming back from Habitat 2, we got everyone along the corridor together to talk about what is our community like, because everyone thought they were the other, right? And so over that course of time, where there was vacant land and hopelessness and high school dropouts and murder rates and literally packs of wild dogs running around on vacant land, we started to develop housing. First building was the one on the corner called 1400 Fifth. It was the first multifamily green building in the nation. that included affordable housing. 60% of it was affordable for people that lived in public housing. The other 33%, 66% was for that. The other 33% was market rate. And so what we had living in there, we had people that lived in public housing, we had people that were firemen and teachers, we had hedge funds managers that lived in there, we had UN diplomats, and everyone said, people won't live like this across 18,000 units of public housing, because if you see kind of in the back of there, from 7th Avenue, if you know Harlem, from 7th Avenue and 115th Street over to 2nd Avenue down to 111th, it's nothing but public housing. And people have said, well, if you're poor and you live in Harlem, your future is already prescribed, right? And what we believe is that by building different kinds of buildings and attracting different kind of people, we could change that future that someone had written on the wall. So in the first building, the thing that we did is we had a community space. And what we did is we partnered with Columbia University Teachers College. And what they did is they came and started a mentoring and tutoring program, right? That worked exclusively with kids from public housing, right? And it worked for a while, right? But it quit working because it was a condominium, and the condominium association took over it, right? After we run the building for 2 years or 3 years, and they put Columbia out and they turned it into retail space, right? And so the next building that we started on that in 2004. When we got designated to build that building, we were building it in a contested site, not that different from the site we're trying to build here on the Y, right? And when we looked in the Daily News in the paper, and there was a big sign on bed sheets hanging out of the public housing directly behind us. It said, greedy developers are taking our athletic fields from our kids, right? And I'm like, oh, I think they're talking about me, right? So I came up, we went over, I met with Maurice Fawcett, who ran the South Harlem Reds at that time, right? And I said, well, Maurice, you know, I understand your concern, but here are a couple things you need to think about. The city of New York is going to build a new baseball field in Marcus Garvey Park, and we're going to pay for half the cost, right? And what we're going to do in this building is we're going to do something that is going to change people's lives, right? So he says, well, what do you mean? I said, well, Maurice, how many young boys in your baseball team went to college last year? I don't know. He says, a couple of years ago, we had a kid that went to college, right? I said, oh, okay, great. So how many of your girls went to college? He says, we don't allow girls to play on our team. This is just for boys, right? So I said, what if I said to you, we're going to bring in a program that is going to change the lives of boys and girls in dramatically ways that rewrites their future, right? And he said, it's absolutely impossible. These kids are poor, they come from broken families, they can't be helped. When people are being honest with you, they will tell you that's what they believe. And a lot of black communities, there's a sense of hopelessness that we can't help ourselves. And what I do believe is that we can help ourselves, right? And so we put in a program called, among other things, we put in a program, next slide. Well, we won a lot of awards, you know, from building organizations, the U.S. Green Building Council, and the Urban Land Institute, and blah, 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 but that's not the slide I want to do. That's there. These are the slides we want to do. We put in 2 organizations there. We put in one called My Image Studios, which is a cultural facility, right? And it's a performance space that does live music, it does film, it does community seminars, it has a restaurant, it has a coffee shop. It's what we call a neutral zone, from people from all over Upper Manhattan, actually all over the city, come there and meet and exchange ideas it doesn't have anything to do with income, because again, this building is 50% rate, affordable and 50% market rate. And this building is 50% market rate and 50% affordable. So we've had famous musicians there. We've had all sorts of people. Next slide. We've commissioned art there. This is what the space looks like. Next slide. And this is Street Squash. This is a program that we told Maurice about. And it's a program we built 8 squash courts. We built 2 classrooms and a library. And every year since 2008 when it opened, 300 kids come through there from public housing and public schools that were failing, and they graduate from high school, they go on to college and they graduate. They teach them to play squash, right? They take them on tours all over. They do academic training, enhanced training for the SAT test, etc. But moreover, Columbia University's squash team practices there. And it doesn't cost Columbia a thing, but they're required to mentor these kids, right? And so suddenly these kids that didn't know Columbia University existed, and it's on 116th Street, except on the other side of Morningside Heights. It changed their world, it changed their outlook, and every year these kids go to Columbia and many other schools when people said it was hopeless for them. And so what I'm saying is, if we work together, we can start to change our world. Next slide. So we started when we came to, I don't know Mount Vernon. My partners are from Mount Vernon, and they brought me up here because they had been designated. And I said, well, I was thinking Mount Vernon, you know, Scarsdale, you know, wealthy suburb, you know. I'm like, oh, no, Marvin, I don't do that, you know. Yeah, and so he brought me here. Yeah, well, he brought me here, and I found that out. And I found out that Mount Vernon, where we were working, where he proposed to stay, was a place that had a really vibrant community. I came up here on weekends and walked around at night. I talked to people. I looked at the community. I saw transit was there. And I got a good feel for this is a community that we should be investing in. But when we looked at the numbers on Mount Vernon, the south side was just very different from Fleetwood. It was very different from the rest of Westchester, right? Westchester has a 4%, or less than 4% unemployment rate. The 3 census tracts around this have a 19% unemployment rate. The people that are under the care of the prison industrial system is like 1 out of every 11. The high school dropout rate is elevated. Everything that you can think out that should be good is not working like it can work. And so what we wanted to do, next slide please. What we wanted to do is figure out what we could do here. Now Marvin, say that again. Okay, Marvin and Diana, who started on this project, had been designated to purchase the parking lot and the former YMCA building. And the very first thing I heard when I got involved with this is how the YMCA building was a precious asset for the city of Mount Vernon, because there were a lot of stories associated with the city of Mount Vernon. Generations of people had used the YMCA. They had learned life skills, they'd learned swimming, they'd learned all sorts of things. Person after person told me that. And so we understood that, and they wanted, people said, we gotta preserve the Y. Well, first thing we did is we looked at the Y and what does it take to preserve it. So we started with phase 1 environmental assessment, right? And what we found were a whole lot of things. We found asbestos, we found lead paint, we found PCBs, we found oil spills, we found a bunch of stuff, right? They were all, they could cause asthma, they were carcinogenics, right? And the thing that we know is that we want, everyone in Mount Vernon wants the best for their children, right? But we don't want cancer for our children. And there are known carcinogenics there, right? And that strikes me because I lost a child to cancer, right? That wasn't, you know, from anything hereditary, but something they got from the environment in a building where they went to school or where they lived, etc. And so we don't want that for our children. We want the best for our children. Next slide, right? And so we looked there. The history of the building site said in the 1930s it was a commercial dry cleaning site there. Well, in the 1930s, what they did is they dumped perk into floor drains on the floor, dry wells, poured it out the windows. It's a known carcinogenic. It's a site that you really have to inspect to be sure there aren't things there that are dangerous, right? It was also the site of an old printing plant. This was not originally built as a Y. This building started as three separate buildings at different times and had various uses, right? And this was all done before 1977 when there was an Environmental Protection Act. So no one was paying any attention. But we pay attention because we build healthy buildings. Next slide. And so lead paint. Everyone knows, I guess, the big stir up in New York because they dummied up the lead paint reports but in New York City public housing, right? And they found out the kids have been living there ingesting lead paint dust, right? It's irreversible, right? You can't change it, right? And there's lead paint in this building. So, next slide, please. Next slide. And so when I think about, me, we are all called to do something, right? And I was originally trained as an architect. I grew up in the South. My parents moved there to work in the civil rights movement when I was 7. They moved from Jackson, Mississippi in 1957, right? And I grew up thinking that my calling in life was to fix our broken communities. And as a kid, I had this whole Nehemiah 2 drummed into me that our communities are broken. Why shouldn't I be sad? But we're called to fix it. And my family, my sister, my mother, my father, my daughter, my son, that's what we've done. We've all been called to fix our communities in our own way. And so at some point, we have to decide, what do we stand for, right? Do we believe that there is a brighter future than the past? Brighter future than the past or the present? Then the only way for that to happen is to take affirmative action to make sure it happens. And what we're proposing here is to do something affirmative to make sure there is a brighter future than the past. Next slide. And so what we do is, as I said before, we don't just build buildings, we invest in communities, right? We build stronger communities. And what we're doing is we invest in human capital, environmental capital, and physical capital. We do build buildings. We try to build a stronger environment. Our buildings are green, they're healthy, they're certified as healthy buildings, as green buildings. And we try to make that community better for humans. Next slide. And those are just some of the organizations that we've been certified for our buildings before, and these buildings will be certified by the U.S. Green Building Council, the healthy, the well-certified buildings, Passive House US. Next slide. And that is far too little for anything to read, for anyone to read, right? But everything in green are lifestyle things that are available for people that live in the community as well as people in the buildings. What typically happens when people build buildings in disinvested communities is they put a guard or concierge up at the front door and they say, only people that live here can use anything here. This is not for you. And we don't do that. In our buildings in Harlem, we didn't do that. In this building, we won't do that. So I'm going to get a little closer so I can actually read these things that are there. And so what we have there in green is we have, I can't even read that. We have, I'll just go by memory. We have music practice rooms, soundproof music practice rooms that are available for residents. We have co-working spaces for artists. We have co-working spaces for writers. We have co-working spaces for people that just want to co-work. We have a maker center with 3D printers and laser CNC machines that Purchase College will run. We have a dance studio. We have a black box theater. We have an art gallery. We have a lot of things that we're trying to gear toward creating and supporting a class of makers and doers, people that in the process of making and doing the way we see and process the world and how people process us. And we think that's incredibly important. And so those spaces are available not only for people that live in this building, but they're available for the community also, right? And the way we've arranged it, for the most part, there's no cost associated with it because we've developed partnerships with people that will do residencies there and do things there. And they will do partnerships with local folks. Next slide. And these partners will do things not only just in the physical space, but we'll run classes there. There'll be Tai Chi classes and self-defense classes, and there's a massage therapist that's on site, and there's a physical trainer that's on site, because the idea is about not only keeping the people in the building healthy, but keeping people in the community healthy, right? And so the idea is where you once had a YMCA that did these things, the process of doing these things now is finding other partnerships and ways of doing this. And that's what this is, that we've structured some fancy financing so we can essentially create this So the social experiment that we are always trying to push the edge a little further, right? Because we look at what we did on our previous projects, and right? We're giving a preference to local residents for 50%. As an artist or maker, on the other hand, right? That are already living in this community to be living in this building, and it's a prerequisite for that is we're saying they have to be engaged with the community. So no matter and that can be as a mentor, that can be in doing robotics, it can be doing in painting, it can be in music, it can be tutoring in math, and any 25,000 hours a year, right? 25,000. If those people are charging just $35 an hour, and when you have a master dancer, $5 an hour, but just pretending the cost would be $35 an hour, this would be roughly worth $800,000 in benefits. Providing the space and providing the services. So we think those are things, important things we're giving to the community. We really believe that, you know, you hear people talk about local. What we do is all about our 5% teacher that already very people is a frequently you hear developers make that commitment. Ready for the workers, right? That as soon as we purchase the land, we will engage with either one or both Youth Build, which we set up a national program when I was on the board of the U.S. Green Building Council, to train through Youth Build workers, Black, Latino workers in green construction. That has an amazing apprenticeship program, right? And what we have to do with that is we have to commit to using their finance on the project, right? Which can be in communities like this because they work out a project labor agreement, right? And that project labor agreement helps you bring the numbers in within your budget, but it provides creating those jobs, but doing it in a way that's real. So frequently you pass by these construction sites and you do see some women and some blacks and Latinos, and they have the lowest paid jobs. They are flag men and flag women, you know, waving the cars by, right? And that beats the blank. But we can do better than that.
Any connection with the trade unions?
Well, they yeah. Through the trade unions. The largest labor training program, you know, in the country, right? And we've worked with them.
Programs here that's already here, and then you're trying to move it. You said you started a program. Can you just now ask a question? You didn't go to him. It ended, somebody else came in and took. People don't know nothing down there. And this is in the middle. This is where so many professionals. It's a community, you have to remove. The problem is because you take it.
Appreciate that comment.
Problem and everything.
Be 53 permanent jobs. Some of them will be in property management. Some will be in wellness and fitness. And so they're committed that half of those will be the people with us here in Mount Vernon, Dance Theater, Harlem, the National Fencing USA. KBM3 Americans as well as African diaspora. With other sort of thing. Where there we want to where 20% of their disposable income within walking distance. In this neighborhood that will be spent, and that will have an economic impact. Second Street rather, you know. All those things will have an has a because the money one of the we had an appraisal done by a company that was recommended by HCR and the banks because they're on the than that into the money. So we started with an offer that not operating 25. The city's revenues are going down. The likelihood of the city doing that. And so this sort of new way that communities are starting to do things is what we want to bring to Mount Vernon. Next slide. And so what we found about it that makes it, you know, a good place. $1 million total investment. We have to raise, $20 million on our own. And $25 million in this, and then we have to borrow the rest of the money, right? And so the idea is that the state is putting in support here than to build anything else. So they're committed to doing it, and no one is committed to build multifamily workforce housing here in Mount Vernon. So this would be a first, and it's a competitive process. And for the moment, we have the state's attention. Next slide, please. It's 320 apartments, 96 of them reserved for a teacher or a fireman or a healthcare worker or, you know, a municipal employee could live there. And they will be nice houses. They will be as nice as the pictures you showed you in Carlin, right? And this is kind of what the building looks like conceptually. It goes through a block from 2nd Avenue to 3rd Avenue, and it sort of drops off because 3rd Avenue is lower than 2nd Avenue. And so it has essentially a first floor that is a residential interest and community interest. And a space, an 8,000 square foot space that we're trying to get the Boys and Girls Club to take. We've talked to the Youth Bureau. Service to communities, right? The first floor, which is the first floor from 2nd Avenue, you start on the left. The next space is the dance theater, Black Box Studio. The white stripe is a library co-working space. The entrance is right there. Then the next space is those little white things that are really deep. That's one of the co-working. Soundproof music rehearsal rooms. And then those are artists' lofts on the back side there, facing 3rd Avenue. Next slide, please. These are just some renderings from what some of the interior spaces will look like. The lounges, the space that looks very much like this, the art gallery. Next slide. Soundproof music rooms, the dance studio, the co-working space for artists. Keep going. Those are two different outdoor spaces. The ones down at the bottom are the ones that are on that low roof that are open to the public. And there's another one up on the top floor. Next slide, please. The one pictured at the top is the one on the top floor. That's the typical floor. It's 70% one bedrooms and studios, and about 25% two bedroom units. One of the things we were doing is because there's this big concern about bringing in too many children, overpopulating the school system, et cetera, et cetera. So we didn't focus on building units for families, but primarily for young people and empty nesters, right? But one of the things when we met with the superintendent of schools, and we just talked about it, one of the things that healthy schools are they're like three-legged stools, right? The one leg is the school administrators and the teachers and everyone involved in that, you know. And so frequently, if schools aren't working, people throw darts at them and say it's all your fault. But there are two other important legs, you know. The second one is the community, right? How supportive is that community been for that school? What sort of activities is that community doing to enhance or to magnify what the school is doing? And that's what we're doing here. We're doing things that will enhance the things that the school is doing. And the third thing is how engaged are parents, right? At Street Squash and at MIST, we've kept parents engaged, right? We expect to do the same thing here so that we have the two legs that we can do something about, doing something about. And so we think that makes a difference. Next slide. To make all this happen, beyond buying all the land, we have to do a rezoning. So that's the 2 square blocks we have to rezone. Next slide. And that rezoning, over time, things would get built out, and there would be up to another $30 million in property tax increments, assuming that land is built out over the next 10 years, the next 20 years. The cost of this to us, as a developer, to purchase land to do the rezoning, it's about $2 million. The cost to the city is zero. The cost to Mount Vernon residents is zero. Next slide. And, you know, who receives the benefits? Well, we all do. You know, we all benefit from making this community stronger. Next slide. And so one of the things that we always do when we work on projects like this, we always, once we get control of the site, set up an advisory committee, right? A community residents that are self-selected, right? Because on this project, it gets to be really important because we need to select artists, we need to select makers, we need to understand what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong as we go through the design process. We need to have input on programming once the building gets built, you know, what is actually going to happen there. And what we want to do is have a real partnership for residents of the community that have the time to be engaged and help us make good decisions about how this goes forward. So, you know, that's essentially what we have to say, and the rest is just questions about what we're doing, concerns, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, Carl, what we'll do is start, if anybody has questions, you know, has some questions from the captain right now. It's perfectly open, church,
Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I was just taking a few notes, and we have some of our I thank you and congratulate you on your vision. However, I'm concerned, and we can talk offline or whatever, but I'm concerned with my church that has been part of that area and that community for 73 years. I hear you talking about including the parking lot. That's the same parking lot that my congregants use every Wednesday, every Saturday, and every Sunday. So I have a concern. I'm concerned about my church, our building. If we're talking about putting together a proposal to build what the investment would be, maybe I was 10 minutes late, but I didn't is where's the $5 million this new possibilities. I don't live on the south side, but that doesn't matter. Have you thought about making the YMCA a part of the invested in the YMCA? As you mentioned, concern, and once again, I'm not shooting it down. Be dedicated to Mount Vernonites. I think a lot, and my concern today, Mount Vernon is known as the city of homes. All my life, I was so proud to go to Brooklyn and to the Bronx and Harlem and tell people I'm from Mount Vernon. And then the word must have got out about how good Mount Vernon was, because then I had people from the Bronx, Brooklyn, Harlem moving into Mount Vernon. When you move into a certain place, we have to be careful, because some folk don't have the same values, they don't have the same intentions, and so, once again, I'm not shooting it down, but I have concerns that I have to talk to my congregation about, that are nervous, because once again, and this was a beautiful presentation. Yo, let's give them a hand. This is beautiful. I know Brother Church, one of my good friends, this is beautiful. But I would like to see a presentation that included the church. The church is the heartbeat of the community. We cannot invest in the church, in the community, and build around the church. And then what happens when the neighborhood becomes so built up and parking is already limited in Mount Vernon, and now the church got to park 3 or 4 blocks away? I said, well, Pastor, your main concern is the church. Absolutely it is. And my congregation that goes there. So I have to speak on their behalf. So those are just some of the questions. I don't know if you can answer some of them now. Like, why isn't the YMCA included in that wonderful development? And also, what's the plans for the current lobby?
I can answer some of your questions. Some of them I have no idea what the answer is, right?
That's all right. I can be with you.
And so I'll start with the ones I have an answer to. Okay, and the first one that I have an answer to is, why can't the Y be included in that development, right? And quite frankly, the initial conceptual drawings for this included the Y in this development, right? Now, here's the answer, one part of the answer. We are really about providing services, right? You have to have a certain amount of scale, right? Because we take money from the people that rent the building and we put it into services for not only the people in the building, but also the people in the community, right? And so when we looked at including the Y building as it stands itself, right, there were 2 options, right? One, the building is incredibly expensive. It's actually more than that, right? And so when you look at the numbers, only way we could get a building large enough to have enough residents in there, we had to build a 30-story building, right? And the cost of building, just round numbers, the cost of building a 30-story building, hard cost, is about $450 a square foot. The cost of building a 10-story building is about $250 a square foot. It's a $200 difference per square foot. So when you see high-rise buildings going up above 10, above 12 stories, that means people are paying a lot more rent, right? Our rents, are moderate, right? And so if you look at rents, even at the project that's going on in Fleetwood, right, you'll see rents up at $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. And so, because when you build a tall building, it just costs more. And we just couldn't get that financed on the south side of Mount Vernon because it's considered by the financial institutions an emerging market, right? The question was, when we had discussions with the city about who's going to pay for operating the Y, and they said, we don't have the money, you have to do it, right? And it was, that was a non-starter. And so what we focused on is how can we do programs that in some ways don't really replicate what the Y would do, but gives programs that don't exist here, or if they do exist, enhances them, right? And so that's the why question. I think the questions that you raise, one, for us to take public money from the state and from private investors and invest it in a church, that's just not going to happen. I'll go to jail for that, right? But what I can say is this, right? When we've done other projects, right, around churches, right, the churches have generally done better because we brought more people to the neighborhood, right? And so there are churches that have done better because we brought more people, right? That does not mean to say that we haven't done projects where we've done some modest improvements to the church, et cetera. But it's not $5 million worth of work. It's just a little painting, a little sidewalks, a little this, a little that, but nothing that huge, right? But I think the big issue is the parking, and we don't know the answer to that.
Okay, well, we'll sit and find out the answer to that. And let me also just go back to the church. We have a church on 132nd Street in Harlem, and I think it's Adam Clayton Powell, Williams Institutional Christian Methodist Episcopal Church. That was just acquired, just as part of a rollout project. I don't know if you're familiar with it, under the leadership of Dr. Clay, Julius Clay. Not only did they include
I didn't. But listen to me. The U.S. at some time in the past year or so was no longer the #1 country in the world. It's China now. Our economy is going to fall. And the people who are going to hurt more when the U.S. is no longer #1 are black and brown people.
Absolutely.
We're going to hurt more. We hurt even when the U.S. was #1. We're not going to survive in this new world order. We're not going to survive. We have to make sure our children get a good education. Here's my position. If you're going to come into Mount Vernon, and you're going to build here, and you're going to make money, do something for our children. Do that first. One computer. We won't get a pool in this building. And you know why we won't get a pool? Because that pool that's there now, that's fixed up, we have to, whoever comes in to develop or whatever, has to dig up that pool, to go under there and test that soil, to make sure that oil tank that's there is not leaking and not spilling oil into the environment and the ground. There's a lot of crap down there. If we decide to go in and fix that pool, it's going to cost us a lot more money than it would have been before 1977. You know why? Because the EPA and the DEC have strict rules about what you can do when you build a pool or build a building. It's going to cost us millions. And we have to do it right. Anybody who comes here have to do it right, because these are our children, and black and brown children have been left behind. Whenever you see things like lead paint and all those things in houses, black and brown children get the worst of it. We have to hold our leaders accountable to make sure we're taken care of.
That's right.
Because when you talk about learning disabilities in the black community, that comes from the chemicals that young children have been exposed to. We are not going to open that pool or any part of that building if our children are going to be harmed. It is our responsibility. I don't care what anybody tells you. Yes, sir. Yes.
Sick
it was called investment. It was investment. That's what took it down, not because it had this, what is it? It's not because of that. You know why they know where that came from? Once they let it go. Once they let it go. And number two, in right place where they had the number one YMCA, this YMCA was a thorn in their foot. They didn't want it. They didn't want it. Okay, and then I saw what you mean. When you talk about the kids, do you know that everybody has a choice in life? We have choices. And guess what? When you come out your door, there's nobody standing in front of your door and saying, don't go to school, don't get educated, and not get a job. People need to stop making excuses. The parents need to be held accountable for what their children are doing. And everybody talk about these kids is off the hook. They're off the hook because their parents are off the hook. Okay? These parents think that school is a babysitting place where they just giving their kids let them go babysat. They should have to be accountable for babysit their own kids. How's the teacher going to teach a class when the class only got 25 minutes? They spend 23 minutes trying to do the class in order.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm not disagreeing with you. But here's the thing, right? Well, okay, well, I'm gonna say something to your baby.
I'm from my work. 41 weeks on this block, I've been here on 2nd Avenue. I've seen things come, I've seen things go. And they say this and that, you don't have money. Well, what about the people who learn how to that took the money, put it in their bank accounts, whether they want the house?
We can't control that. And let me tell you something
That's
about
not control.
I cannot control that.
You can, but it can't be controlled.
Well, let me tell you something. Let me tell you what we can do. Carlton is an expert in building residential communities, not just houses, that can work for communities. That's what we're going to do. We're going to contribute. Hey, if you're an expert in building power plants, you build your power plants. If you're an expert in something else, you do it. We, as members of the community, we have got to do something. We have got to do something. This community is going to die if we do. We cannot do that. I know. Let me tell you something. If we go in that YMCA to build it now, and we have to spend $8 million, who is going to pay for that? No investor is going to pay for that. Who? It's not enough. The money. They're not, investors are not going to invest in the YMCA because you know what they're going to say? How are we going to get paid? Investors are going to ask, how are we going to get paid? What's that?
Let this young lady talk and then we'll
Yeah, so a number of issues I wanted to raise. First of all, I live in Mount Vernon. I'm also a transplant. I was raised from Jamaica to New Rochelle, moved to Mount Vernon because I love Mount Vernon, even more than New Rochelle, moved back to New Rochelle and back to Mount Vernon. And I think that Mount Vernon gave me an opportunity to participate, where I didn't have that privilege in New Rochelle. And what I'm going to say is we have to do something different and we have to think outside the box. If we continue to do the things we have to do, we're going to get the things we have been getting. So we have to do something different. We have to think outside the box. We have to think beyond ourselves and think about globally what is good for the majority of people in Mount Vernon. It may not fit everybody. Events and programs. We just don't have the programs. So it's not the sites that we need. We don't need the YMCA building. We have a Dole Center. We have an armory. We have the public library. We have so many other places where our children can go and do things. We need the investment in the programs, which is not something that you could possibly answer because it's not your job. You're here as a developer to bring something new to Mount Vernon to maybe enhance people's, even their conception.
Well, we're bringing programs to it.
We're bringing programs but in a different way than we're used to. And so I think we have to have an open mind, and we have to think about, we should not be concerned about people coming in from other places. You're always going to have an influx and an outflow of people, and I think if people come to a community that's vibrant, and where they feel they have an opportunity to grow, they're going to almost be forced to grow themselves. And so we have to raise our standards of what we want in terms of our living spaces and our communities, and even the type of program that we expose our children to. You know, I see a piano. I see, them doing other instruments besides what they're used to doing. They do African dance. Well, they can bring classical always going to expect different results. That's the same. Where we want to get to as a community. And we're bringing a lot of people. Well, part some level, and so we should think about that, figure that out, and put it in. We have to kind of, we're not going to get everything we want. None of us might not. We might not. But if we can get most of what we're looking for, the priorities, then I think everyone should be satisfied with what the next compromise.
I don't know why, but we have to be willing to bring young people who want to stay here. Once they get married, they want to leave because they want to get away from the school district. Yeah.
I'm not going to say anything. Well, I hope not to. But I agree with my sister here. Investing is very important. Investing in our children are paramount. I agree. However, you can deal with the child for an hour and pray that it will have an lasting effect. But it's the parents, it's the family values, it's what happens when we send that kid back home. And you keep bringing up the South Side versus Fleetwood area, we have to spend time with our children. Parents have to be parents. Because you know why I'm harping on the church? Because when we have the children out in the street doing everything, and we have the parents that have not been educated or not prepared, guess where they come with their children that just got kicked out of school, that just got arrested. They're not going to call the development, and I'm coming to your building on 116. They're not calling y'all. At 2 and 3 in the morning, you know who they're calling? The pastor.
I agree with you. Pastor, in a wheel, there are several cogs, and every cog does its own job, right? Our expertise is not
Right.
It's not that, right? Our expertise is giving back in a different way.
Right.
Your expertise is not building communities with buildings, right? We all, everybody has their role to play in our community. And truthfully, I vote for Mount Vernon. Right now, our leadership is not doing its job. So guess what? We have to do some work, okay? We have to do some work. As for the library, you asked about the library, and then I'm going to get someone else to speak, right? You asked about the library. We approached the library when we first started. We approached the library because we're not going to buy the space for the library. The library's going to stay the library. But we were going to we told the library, listen, we are going to offer you space in the building to support a 21st century library. The architect we were using was the same architect that was doing the Columbia University Library. So libraries have changed. They're no longer with stacks of books that are being warehoused. Libraries now are more of a community space. They're more of a space where, you know, everybody has a computer. You can get everything by computer now. And so our library right now, and the space will also be ADA accessible. It's accessible to people who are physically disabled. Okay, we approached the library about that. They rejected the plan, and that's one of the reasons why the space is called Library Square. They rejected the plan. It's not going to, the building is not going to be in Library Square ultimately. Right now, this is our working name. So we did come to the library to make an offer. They rejected the plan, but we originally wanted to do something to make that library more accessible to the community.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
My name is Kelly Gardner. I work for Amani Public Charter School, which is on the block behind the library. Yes. I'm big on education, as you speak, and I agree with the lady that spoke right here. You can't fix something that's broken always. Sometimes change is needed. And my whole thing is, my students are now preparing for a community garden. This is their second year, and they use that empty space behind the YMCA. So right now, and I've lived in Mount Vernon all my life and also moved out of Mount Vernon. So I know different sides of different places. But I feel like the community for kids they need to see upcoming things. They need to see revitalized work. If they keep seeing broken stuff, then they'll feel broken inside. I always talk to my sister and my family members, like, if you have a cluttered mind, you pretty much, your life will be cluttered. So with the kids now, when they walk out of 60 South 3rd Avenue at Monty Public Charter School, it's nothing but broken down, ran down stores. So therefore, they run down and do run down things. So they feel like they can have fights and they feel like they can do things. I think you coming into the community would be awesome, but you have to think about what you're doing is think about coming into the school and speaking to some of our parents and see and do a forum with our parents and say, hey, what are other programs that best? Because in our school we do ballroom classes, dancing classes, which teach them ballroom dancing. So the initiatives that you have are awesome, but I also feel like you should take some seniors that's in the high school and figure out what do the community need, because at the end of the day, they are our future. So with us being parents themselves and teachers, we're nothing. We've been here for 40 plus years. So the kids, if you sit down and do a forum with them and find out what they need, I think that will help your development way better than what is going on right now. Because you'll just get bickering back and forth right now.
Right, and that's why we're going to have the community advisory board, where we want people like you and other people in the community to give us feedback and tell us how can we best help you? How can we best help you?
Good evening. I actually live on that block, in one of those buildings next to the church. And I've been sick for the last 10 years. And I've been on that block about 4 or 5 years. And I moved there because it's the only place I could get like a second floor apartment. But I have a 9-year-old, and I moved there because I did hear about this plan, the Library Square. Originally, I thought I moved there because the YMCA, I wanted my daughter to have access to the YMCA and the library. So it's, you know, most people, my daughter Caitlin, most people know her at the library more than me. You know, everywhere we go, hi Caitlin. But the thing is, these programs are wonderful, and one of the things that I am concerned with as a mother is programs. You know, my daughter is a budding designer, and I now have to try to find a summer program in fashion design for a 9-year-old in Manhattan, you know, that I can't afford. And there have been times that I have approached, you know, the city about bringing different programs to Mount Vernon so that we can expose our kids to different things, not just the same routine things that every Black child know already, right? But different things like archery and all those things, and horseback riding, and all the different things that we want not only our children to be educated the right way, but we want them to be well-rounded. And a well-rounded child, to me, is a child that is, you know, the parent is taking responsibility of that child, the actions of your child, and if your child does something in school, you don't come and curse out the teacher because your child misbehaved, but you reprimand and you punish your child. My child was in this public school system, and I had to pull her out because she doesn't fight, and she was there for 6 months and had 3 fights because of the way she talked and because of how she behaved, because I'm trying to raise my child the right way. And even when I brought her the first day, the teacher said she doesn't belong here. And I said, that's not right. You understand? And now I sacrifice for her to go to Our Lady of Victory, right? So this building, this community would be a great addition to that area, right? But it also takes the community to maintain. And my concern is I see how the community maintain new stuff. And my concern is that this beautiful building with all these precious things, these wonderful things for our kids are going to be there, and within a year it's going to be a flipping mess, because the people in the community do not know how to take care and how to take care of their community. And if we're going to do this, we need to teach the people how to take care of the community. That wonderful community garden that Imani School built up. I mean, I walked back there and there was some guy with his leg up and smoking a blunt because, you understand, and now it's a mess. So this is all well and good, and I would love to see you come there because I did move on that block because of this. Because I was looking to the future, you understand, for my child, and I did go to the YMCA, and I would love to see the YMCA start. Stay there, but I think we do need to think outside the box, and we do need to expose our kids to different things. So as a parent, and as someone that, you know, I am limited to where I go, you know, I think it's a great addition.
Yeah, I thank you, and we are going to do everything we can to make sure the building, the physical building stays well, and we're committed to making sure that in the community, we keep those services there. And you might be in luck because if a fashion designer moves into the building, your daughter gets free tutoring.
Hi, I'm Kimberly. I have a question. I'm all for the beautification of Mount Vernon, okay? I'm looking forward to it. The Mount Vernon do need more programs for our children. But we cannot overlook that there's a shelter at the corner of the block. Yeah. And there's some other low-income families. So we cannot always throw a band-aid on the brokenness that's in Mount Vernon. But maybe sometimes, I know that people volunteers. How about getting volunteers from the women from the shelter or from across the street, having them included so they won't feel left out. So they don't know how to take care of what
Absolutely. While in our lead, we are going to make sure that everybody who lives in the building volunteers. If there are volunteers from the community who want to participate, we're not going to close our eyes. The idea is to make sure we get to the space of giving back, especially to our children.
Or even like
I
have like a workshop inside of there. Hello, parents. Go out there. People that love and that and don't charge them $1,000 a week to come to one of your programs because they can't afford it.
Well, you know, and I think those are all good points. And near the end of my talking there, one of the things we said we wanted to do is set up an advisory committee because we don't know all the answers. We know some of the answers, right? But ultimately what happens is the building gets built and then becomes a living, breathing organism, right? And it will be no better than the people that are in this community that engage with it, right? And so, yes, the women in the shelter, we will reach out to them. We would want them to be on the advisory committee. We would want to reach out to people that are currently former members of the Y. We would want to reach out to people who are artists. We would want to reach out to people who have been longtime stakeholders and pastors, right? And pastors. I meant to start at pastors. And because the idea is that we need all this input. Now the important thing is to me, in my past what has worked best is when people self-select, right? Not that they are appointed to be a part of a committee or an advisory committee, but they say, I care enough, I'm going to be involved, and I'm going to come out. And what our job is to do is to make sure that everyone feels welcome to be part of that. And then what happens, right? And we don't have control of that. What our job to do is to open the door, set up the infrastructure, and then that's where we get the sort of input from the people that I would guess in most buildings that have been done in Mount Vernon, no one has ever offered to have input on an ongoing basis or to have programs. And so, though the things we say we're doing will not solve every problem, right? Won't even come close. But it needs to be valued in the perspective of what else is going on in Mount Vernon and what other people are doing. And we think we're stepping up the game.
Can I use this one? Yeah. Hi, my name is Lamar Johnson. I grew up in Mount Vernon way back when. I did leave, but I came back. You answered a question that I initially had. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Is this better? I said I grew up in Mount Vernon. I was gone. I've come back. I'm very familiar with the Y, and initially I was very distraught, and I thought about losing the Y. But I realized that over the country, Ys are closing and they're being diminished, so we've got to open our minds up a little differently. But my initial concern was, you said that residents would be required to volunteer, and you did say that this would be part of their lease, which I think is wonderful. And I think it would set a precedent for volunteerism here in Mount Vernon, and that speaks to that young lady's concern about being inclusive. So I think it would be a wonderful cultural change.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And just a question about the Y. Quickly. In White, last week, 2 weeks ago, it was announced that the White Plains Y was closing. The White Plains Y was closing, and they're looking to do their programs elsewhere. We have been in contact with the White Plains Y, and we'll be setting up a meeting to meet with them to see if we can bring some of their programs into our building. So while the structure won't remain, we're going to see if we can get White Plains to put some of their programs in our building.
Real quick, Mrs. Trace, I just really wanted to know what type of programs you talking about, and is it programs for the kids like coming out of high school, getting ready to work in the job field, and then would it be programs for older people that's trying to get back in the community too? I missed the beginning of it. I just came from work. I just want to know what type of programs is available.
So I'll give you a quick primer. So quick primer of the program. Take me 5 seconds. So listen carefully, right? We're going to have classes for community people like Tai Chi and dance, etc. We're going to have a part of the building set aside for either use by the Youth Bureau or the Boys and Girls Club, or maybe even the White Plains Y. That would be a STEAM program, meaning science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics program for young people. We're going to have a program, a fencing program. That's not just a fencing program, but the core of it will be fencing, but the other aspects of it is that the kids who participate must maintain their academics. There will be classes in there so that they can make sure that they stay in school. They must maintain academics, and they will be given opportunity, because Coughlin was a fencer at Princeton. He tried out for the Olympics in what year?
72.
72 Olympics, right? Did not make it to Olympics. But the idea is that the person who's going to come and teach fencing is also the person who has helped a lot of black and brown children go to for the Olympics. So we may have an Olympic fencer in this room, right over there, right? Okay. So who else? So you got it? We will do that if the advisory board can help us. Yes, sir.
I just wanted to say really quick, my name is Victoria Woods. I recently moved from Harlem. I have been under for about 7 years. Recently West Side system. And it's been hard for me, because I'm trying to figure out a way to get into better, academics and, the school system. I was going to end up moving. And I was just really thinking about moving to Maryland because of the school system. I know you guys are not intertwined with the school system or anything like that. And I don't want to be rude in saying that, this might fall on deaf ears, but, I just feel like we definitely need to incorporate the community and also make sure that we have some involvement with things that's going on. Because if we feel like we're shut out, we're definitely going to, fail and get worse. We have to fix the actual problem, like the birth rate, the babies out of wedlock. This is the problem that's happening when you have these kids in school. The moms don't know what they're doing. They're sending kids to school. Kids are learning different things. And I just feel like they need to incorporate some type of behavioral science where they have counselors also. Because whether you know it or not, kids also have feelings. They also deal with things as, they're human, So to better that and have a brighter future, I believe we should just incorporate the behavioral science. I'm actually going to school and I'm changing my career because of the entrepreneurship that I was trying to achieve here in Mount Vernon was not working out for me. I didn't have any mentorship doing nail technician jobs and different things like hair, cosmetology, excuse me. And so, I just want to change my career into behavior science because I felt like that was definitely a part of missing out of the community as far as building the children up and letting them know that we definitely care about them, not just, just sit to the side and get homework, and I do my part. My son come home, I give him extra books. We go to Five Below, about $15 books. Also, another thing about the school system, which I'm still not involved with, but it's an issue, because it does start there. My son had a substitute the whole year. I have to go into class and sit with the class and make sure the class is going right, and I'm doing an extra job trying to get obtain my HSC so I can actually go to college next year. So there's a lot of things that I'm doing that I'm not complaining about because I asked for this, and I actually want to help my community and find ways that I can better myself and the community as well.
As you spoke, I thought about Martin Luther King, right? The biggest movement in this country was started by Martin Luther King. When you got a lot of people who were poor, who didn't have fancy jobs, who didn't have cars or anything, to form a movement in the United States. Hey, this is going to be a movement in Mount Vernon, because you know what? From now on, we're going to demand, once this starts up, we're going to demand that our leaders do something, and if they don't do it, we'll find somebody to do it, right? Okay, Jen.
Hi, my name is Henry Terry. I'm also a product of Mount Vernon. I've been resident in Mount Vernon for over 20 years. That church that we're talking about on the street is my church. And I'm excited about all the programs that I'm hearing about because I have 6 children that I raised in this community, 6. I have 2 in college now, 4 or 5, right? But what I've seen in this community is a lot of projects be put together and start and run for a while and then diminish, right? My biggest concern is, will there be parenting projects in place? Because the parents are getting younger and younger, like in the communities, the children are basically having children. And I think parenting classes would be a great help to this community. Looking for volunteerism is great, but they don't know how to volunteer because, again, the parents, they're not the parents of, our generation. The parents now are the babies that are now having babies, and they don't know how to be parents. So I think that if we had some programs in place to help these young adults and adolescents who are becoming parents to be better parents and have a format as to what parenting is, that they'd be better able to help aid in what we're trying to do with these programs in our community.
I think that you're speaking to the core of many problems in many families. And yes, we're going to have an advisory board. And the advisory board will select the kind of programs they want for the community. But it's not just us. It's not just this building. Right. It's not just this developers.
Oh, yeah, I got you.
That we need to speak about on a larger level.
You were good.
You're right. There are children having children. And it's no fault of their own when they get to have challenges with their children and they don't know how to solve, right? Because they're not mentor that they don't have the language.
My name is Davey Terry, and basically I grew up in the community that definitely the word I had to describe what I've experienced growing up here, I don't even have. It's been a roller coaster. And what I can say is that I'm happy that you guys actually show me coming on because I feel like this community that needs it more than anything.
Oh, excuse me. Everyone, before you leave, please call your city council members and let them know that you support the project. If you do, right? Yeah, the phone numbers are right there. Just call them and let them know that you support the project, okay? I'm sorry.
No, I just want my burning
general to understand is that we're at the precipice right now. We're in the middle of the change. And I feel like the real reason that we got shot down the first time we just went to council was because Mount Vernon likes to hold on to old ideas. Just hold on to old things that just need to be let go. Whether it's Memorial Field, whether it's Memorial Field, whether it's the YMCA, Mount Vernon, just, it's not a community that likes to change. But change is exactly what we need. If we continue to do the same thing over and over again and just cater to the old and not think about bringing in something new, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We continue to be the same way. Now, what I feel like a lot of what everybody's saying is that if you're going to come into this community, look at what it is, and look at the problems that exist already, and gear those programs towards that. If you just come in and just try and do whatever you want to do, the community is automatically going to reject it. One thing about Mount Vernon is that we're a community that we stick together, but we also operate on a gospel, not fact. Yes. Everybody in this room, it's our job to make sure that we generate the facts and not the gospel.
Oh, yeah. There are a whole lot of gossips about this project, right? Just so you know.
That's why I came.
That's right. There's a whole lot of gossips, and not so much good things. Go ahead, young man.
I went, many people here have gone to Mount Vernon, came back for one reason or another because we saw the potential of what Mount Vernon could be. But one thing I'm concerned with is, I love the idea of the program. Especially since we're going into an era where internet information and technology is at an all-time high, and sharing everything can be done in an instant. I think the programs need to reflect that, because our kids are not the same kids as we were 10, 15, 20 years ago. I got out of this community playing football. My nephew plays the drums and he wants to learn how to, write programs. My concern is you're building this building and you're putting people in this building. I'm a chef. I make enough money yearly to pay rent in any building in Mount Vernon. Yet me and my family are about to be homeless because my credit isn't high enough for them to rent me an apartment. So the people you're trying to bring and put into this building, professional or otherwise, you have a lot of professionals here in Mount Vernon that can't afford, because of credit, can't get an apartment on a block where nobody's really there. I got people that are sitting on the corner doing nothing, can go into DSS, sign a paper, and almost get instant housing. Yet, me, my wife, and my daughter can't find a place to live because my credit score isn't 10 points higher than what it should be, than what it is now. Who are you putting into this building?
You're being part of the creative class.
Let me say this, right? And buildings that have done work, and here's how buildings work. People build buildings and they hire property managers, and the property manager says these are the rules, right? The rules are just all made up. There is no law that says you have to have an 850 credit score or whatever to rent an apartment. It's poppycock. It's nonsense, right? And so because of what we do, right, you would be interviewed and your credit thing wouldn't be the big deal. You'd have to demonstrate that you had the income, right? Because what we will look at, if you're getting a unit that's subsidized, right, we have to see 3 years, proof of what your income was to see where you qualified. But if you made more than 100% of the median income, right, we wouldn't have to even do that. We just see what your income was and you get it. And so it really depends on the ownership of a building for that, because New York State rules on that about credit scores, they're really non-existent. That's something property managers make up, because property managers do get a lot of losses when they don't know the community. And I think hopefully our strength will be that over time, as we go through this process of getting the approvals, designing the building, getting engaged with the community, that in fact we do know the community.
The reason why I ask is because 2 brand new buildings have gone up in the city of Mount Vernon. And from what I understand, the one that's on Brampton Avenue is not even 50% full yet. Families like mine can't get in. And then I turn around and even with my wife being disabled, can't get in. My child is in the top of her class. And because my credit score isn't 10 points higher than what it is, I'm 2 weeks away from sleeping in my car.
And I'm gonna tell you, I can't do anything about that for those building owners. When this building gets built, if you apply to it, that's not a problem you would have, right? But for other building owners, I can't speak for them.
I just want to know if it's going to be a different, or is this going to be a third building being built? Hey, it's going to be the same.
How many of
thing.
those buildings were developed by a developer that was an African American named Carlton Brown?
I lived in people who lived in Mount
Right,
Vernon.
and so there weren't any, right? There, and that I'm different, and I'm just telling you that I'm different. You can believe it, you cannot believe it, but I'll tell you, if you would just call people, go around the country, go around the world, and look at what I've done, they would say, "Oh yeah, he's different." Right? I am different because in a lot of ways, whatever we do, nobody's self-made, right? We are really, what we do and who we are is really the result of how we interpret our life experiences, right? And my life experiences are probably very different from every other developer that has worked in Mount Vernon, right? And how I interpret those life experiences, i.e. that defines what I do, would be very different, right? So I can't speak for them. I can only speak for what I do.
And oh, by the way, I live in Mount Vernon, so does Mark. So you sit in
One last
you sit at the train station.
Go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
I'd like to know the question.
Go ahead.
I have an interest in this concept about the community advisory group. And I'd like to just get your insights, since I'm sure you've been going around Mount Vernon and introducing yourself to various organizations, engaging them in dialogue. Would you be able to name a couple of the organizations that you would lean towards seeing people self-select from? You know, what organizations other than the churches that we have here in Mount Vernon do you think would offer individuals or a selection of individuals that you can engage in this community council?
Well,
that you know of, ones that you've contacted already.
The people who are seniors, people who are young ladies who come from the what's it called, right? The shelters. We're looking for people who are business people in Mount Vernon that can form a partnership with us. We're looking for every types of people from a wide range of people who can come and partner with us in the advisory group.
So, you know, again, I'm just asking, are there any outstanding organizations that breed these type of volunteers that you know of and that you would be looking to see them produce individuals of the type that you talked about? And I'm asking the question because when we have people run or we look for candidates to run for the school board, we have a hard time finding individuals. They self-select to run, but we have a real hard time finding eligible individuals. And given the nature of this project, let me compliment you on it. I think the vision is great. I'm just wondering where the individuals will be coming from to participate in this great enterprise.
We have not started that structure.
Well, yeah, let me tell you the answer to that. I'm clueless where they would come from, right? And so, you know, I'm just giving it straight, no chaser, right? But what I'll tell you is that over the next 3 months, I hope to be not as clueless, right? And I think the sort of starting point for us is getting an agreement from the city that we can purchase the land, right? And once we get that, that's our sort of starting point where we really sit down and start to dig on that. And I think there are a lot of resources we can talk to about people who know Mount Vernon and know where to look and find the hidden resources. And I think the young lady that was sitting here that said, oh, there are women in the shelter, you know, that's probably a hidden resource that was never called on about the school board or any official things. And so one of the things that my experience is, you know, when I say self-select, I like people who have not necessarily been heretofore engaged in the process to say, I want to be part of this. Not to say that we don't want people that have been engaged, you know, uninvolved, right? But we want to hear voices that are frequently not heard, right? And I don't know Mount Vernon, right? I know the community in which I started working, right? Which was Bedford-Stuyvesant, Ocean Hill, Brownsville. And when we started there were voices that were never heard, right? But they were heard and they became part of it. And some of them own homes there and some of them are running daycare facilities there and different sort of things. So it's a process, right, that we have to really sit down and figure out for this community, right, for Mount Vernon, what is that process, right? We don't know what it is, but certainly what we're willing to do or will do is talk to people so we can get an understanding, you know, of what it is. But right now, I'm clueless.
Young lady right there.
Hi, I just wanted to use the majority of the developers that actually come into the community, they're not talking about creating programs, they're not talking about incorporating young adults and you know, people getting apartments. And if they get the, I did the research with you guys. I got the information yesterday. I'm from IT, and you know, technology changes every 7 minutes.
Right.
So I was like, well, I have a STEM program, but the reality is it's in reference to we just need to change, and it's okay in reference to the change. And I think we just need to all kind of embrace it at this particular time, because Mount Vernon is changing dramatically. I'm walking around my mom's neighborhood, and literally in less than a month and a half, I'm watching developers actually come in and knock a house down, put a house up, and then they sell it to the community. So I'm just ecstatic. I want to see what you guys are going to do. So if there's any way that I can lend a hand, then I will definitely make sure that I will be a part of it. That's on the advisory board, because I think it's needed, and we need something like this now. And we need to do something, and we need to congregate together for change. If we really have to have some change coming on.
I believe in exactly what you said.
And you know what? We need to let our city council members know about it, because we need city council votes to get access to the property. So please.
One of my questions is, what are you guys doing in reference to marketing, or how you got the message out there to get the community to embrace this vision? So I mean, that's one of the things that's lacking here in Mount Vernon is the public relations and marketing aspects of everything. And how are you guys getting the message out there to the community for them to actually embrace it?
Well, let me say this. If you want to talk about something that's been our biggest failure, that would be it, right? I think, well, I don't, on my partner, maybe I shouldn't have said that, right? But anyhow, I just call them like I see them, right? You know, I think that's been our biggest failure, right? I think what we were doing is talking to city council members, talking to planning directors, talking to mayors, et cetera, and it's a process that was really upside down in that sense. It should have really been more engagement with the community. And if you talk about, if someone said, 5 years from now when this project is up, occupied, and you know, things are changing, and people say, what did you do right and what did you do wrong? One of my first things would be, what we did wrong is we didn't engage with the community early enough.
And most of the time, the developers that come into the area, they don't engage the community at all.
Yes. And I would say that our intent was always to engage the community once we had owned the property, because then there was something to engage about, right? And what I really didn't anticipate, that when the city council voted and gave us an MOU that said, we will sell you the property, right? my interpretation of that in every community that I've worked before was that there was a real intent to sell the property, right? And so we started spending money on zoning, on lots of things that we normally wouldn't have done until we had title to the property. And we got to the point that we said, okay, let's purchase the property. They said, no, we don't want to sell it to you because we want to keep the Y. And so that was like a real curveball, just in terms of, literally, I've worked in a lot of places on the planet, right? And this was the first time that had ever happened, that a city had given me an MOU, said we're going to sell the property. Okay, you go spend your money. Let's figure out. We were meeting with people talking about the zoning and hiring consultants to study parking and getting architects and environmental consultants, you know. And they said, no, we were just kidding when we said we wanted to sell the property.
What does MOU stand for people that don't know?
Memorandum of Understanding, right?
It's like a contract.
It's like a contract. It's a contract that was signed by the city and signed by us. And as a consequence of that, we spent close to $500,000.
That's right.
And then had the city tell us, you know, we were just playing. Yeah.
I want to thank you.
Brown.
I can't call my other brother first. So, Mr. Brown, I appreciate the integrity and making that admission, because I was going to critique that particular reality, that this is a process that has come from the top. And obviously you found that what you have is a top-down solution to a bottom-up problem. And I think we have enough evidence here now to prove that we did not go about. But I can't really even fault you, because you're doing what you do for a living. You probably didn't really know the terrain, so you came in doing this business the way you do business. What we didn't have when you started was the appropriate bottom-up kind of responsibility that our leadership should have had to properly present to the community what the possibilities were, and then get the intelligence from the community to find out what do you need. An advisory board should have been the first thing that happened. As a matter of fact, we have block associations that could serve as advisory boards, and what we should have had was a city council and the mayor at the time to properly ratify zone input clusters, if you will, to properly consolidate the information and then find out what needs to be done as a result. But we've come, unfortunately, we've spent money, time, etc., and now we're at this point, and the cart is before the horse. Now, I think this is a great idea, like a lot of people, but unfortunately, you can't build a plane while it's flying. So you got to actually now go to your, and you know, I respect that you're doing the activist and movement piece. All with you, Elder. I feel like, you know, in any black community in this country since the former legal enslavement of our people, the only thing that has ever worked for us first is movements. Politics has been the latter aspect. In economics, it's been the latter aspect of our power, not the other way around. So you're not going to, you know, with all due respect to the intelligent people here, the 35 maybe people you got in here are really the result of a top-down dysfunction. If you really want people to call the city council or the mayor or anybody else that matters, you got to get them to empower themselves. Get the city council, maybe not you, but my neighbors need to get your city council and your mayor to properly ratify. To properly ratify the block associations, or create block associations where they may not exist, to actually get the input of our parents, our children, our elders, the people who, and our business people, by the way, because we have people that could run this community. This could be Black Tulsa, okay? People don't understand that because our education system doesn't teach them that. It's really not their fault. We do have a variety of different issues in our communities that are, you know, self-actuated, but these are legacy issues. We've been here for 200 years dealing with this stuff. Mount Vernon could be a lot of things, but it's not going to be any of them until we start from the bottom and come up. So I would like to suggest that if you go back to the city council, and by the way, one thing you could do is really get the integrity of an independent report. I understand you probably put a lot of money out. Who paid for it? That's not independent, brother. What we need, here's the thing. I'm not gonna, see here, I didn't want to argue on the basis of I'm not casting any aspersions on your integrity or your professionalism, but no independent entity serves the interests of the parties in the negotiation. Anybody knows, I'm no lawyer, but everybody knows that. So, we need to talk about that. Okay, let's talk about that. We'll table an issue. At the end of the day, that's the one thing you could do, to really convince the public. On the other hand, the other thing you need to do is convince the public that the power is theirs, not just to lobby council. You've lobbied council plenty. You've lobbied us now a year and a half later, and, you know, better late than never, but the community needs to really empower itself to then feed you the information you need to put it in power for us.
I just want to make a comment. And I hate to say this, but I'm going to say it. We need, what you said is important. We are professionals. We pay people to do their professional job. They don't need for opinions with us. They got paid, and that's what their professional duty is. There's no developer in this town that you guys in the community ask for independent service other than what we
They should have asked.
No, you can't start with us.
No, but they should have asked.
No.
The council and the mayor at the time should have asked.
No, it doesn't work like that in development. It doesn't work like that.
Then maybe that's why the community is the way it is. And in fact, in white communities, they do ask and they get it. And that's the problem. We rule this, now, brother, I'm
We
not.
gotta talk later.
All right.
Yeah,
But this is historical fact.
Let him say what he got to say.
Once the project is passed, what is the process to get into the village?
The process to do what?
To move into the village.
There are a couple of things, you know, the process of moving into the building, right? One, we have to do a marketing process, and we'll be working with the Housing Partnership in New York and maybe Art Space and some kind of local advisory community. But one of the things that we have to do is we have to be sure that we don't violate any housing discrimination rules, right? Because there's a lot of public subsidy here, and typically what happens here is for those units that have subsidy, right, we'll make ads in the paper, we'll meet with community organizations. By that time, we will have some kind of advisory group. We'll meet with people, and there will be applications that people can fill out. And what happens on these things, they will go through and they will see that you are income qualified for one of the tiers. And then you'll get an application, you'll fill it out, and it depends on what the demand is, right? Now, on other projects we've done, the demand has been real high because our projects tend to be higher quality, and we've had as many as 20,000 residents applying for, 250 units, right? And so when that happens, when there's a lot more demand in terms of applications, a lottery is held, right, for people in those various income groups, and there's a lottery for that. But quite frankly, I don't expect the demand to be that high here in Mount Vernon. Maybe it will be, maybe it won't be. And then there's another process for those people that are artists and makers, right? And there's a great project you could look at that was done in Harlem on what is that? On 101st Street. What is that? Yeah, the art space is. But anyhow, on those things, it's a committee that's put together. Who will be on that committee? And if you are a writer, artist, dancer, singer, computer programmer, they'll interview you. They'll see what you do, and then they'll look at your income, and you'll be qualified that way. So those are the two ways that would happen. If you were buying a unit, renting a unit that had no subsidy, you just come in, you make an application, and they see that your income was high enough to pay the rent, and that would be it. So depending on where you are, there would be 2 or 3 different options of how that would work. Okay.
One more. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last question for the night.
Yeah, I just want to, I've been living in Mount Vernon for 8 years. My wife is a detective in Mount Vernon. I've been a correctional officer for Westchester County for the last 28 years. I'm familiar with a lot of kids. I've been involved with a lot of organizations since the 90s. This is my elder right here, and I'm proud to be standing with them at this forum. Well, one thing I've noticed is that Mount Vernon is being run right now by outsiders that don't look like us, that don't care about us, right? And I said many times, you know, I'm the publisher of Black Westchester Magazine, you know, Mount Vernon is the Wakanda of Westchester, and we allowing our leaders to sell off our vibranium because of the fact that we're in the best part of the land. I don't see, I've been going to city hall meetings, I've been going to community meetings, I don't see no black people be mad about that Lego building that's right down there by the train station, right? That have mentally ill people coming into our city and people get buried and shot. Nobody say that, nobody complain. Nobody complained about the building in Fleetwood that's not even for us. Nobody complained about the building on Grambling Avenue. And they don't even do anything for the community. They just suck the money out of our community and don't even allow working people to be in their buildings, right? So when you have a black developer that has a history record like this brother here, and I'm not just saying it because Marvin's family, right? I'm saying it because I know the man's history. So when he comes in the building, we give them more flack. And then the city agrees to some of the property and then reneges on it, right? We're not outraged. You know, there's no outrage. There's no question why the city council did something like that. They're bringing programs here that the people don't have to pay for, right? I've never heard no developer say, well, we're going to fund programs for the community out the rent of the people that they give us. I never heard that before. And I'm sure nobody else heard no developer in Mount Vernon say that to the people of Mount Vernon. Right? Let's get over the emotional nonsense about the Y's coming back. The Y ain't coming back. Let's bring back the Y. It's not coming back. They're closing White Plains. What make you think they're going to close the White Plains and come back to Mount Vernon? We know that's not going to happen. That's a fantasy. We need to ask those city council members that are spreading these lies, and that's what it is. Because when you ask them, well, where are we going to get the money to fix it? They don't have no. Where are we going to get the money to fund the programs? They don't have no answer. Right? But then they're blocking this brother here to build something that's going to give to the community. And the longer we wait, right, the worse it's going to get. And then if he leaves, what do we have? A broken building? And we still want to be feeding the people nonsense that the Y's going to come back? Come on, we have to start taking the community in our hands. And when we have people like this brother here that's going to come into the community, that's going to stand in front of you and take questions, going to give you the same outline that they gave the city council, right? And then two people want to vote against it, and we say we don't have any reason on it. But the history of the city that they allowed in the council. So I think we need to call those numbers up there, Honorable Janice Duarte, the Honorable David Ferguson, and question them on that.
Neither one that live in the South Side either.
Those are the two people who said no. And question why? Because if you voted no, the people need to know why. Because the history of the city council is that they passed everything else and they never explained anything. So when it comes to someone that looks like us, trying to do something in the community for us, then they need to ask the question. They need to answer our questions is why. And when they say that, then where are you going to get the money from to do it? Because then we just left with a building, then another developer's going to come in and not even care about our community, or the church that's next door. Thank you.
Can I just say one little thing?
One little thing.
Just one quick thing. Hi. Again, I grew up in Mount Vernon, left, have been back for 10 years or so. I've been going to council meetings, zoning board meetings, ARB meetings, blah, 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 blah. This is the first project on the south side, and it's about time. That's all.
What's the next step?
Ladies and gentlemen.
Next step. The next step is the next step. What do? You call, you tell your friends to call Janice Duarte and Daley Ferguson. Because the next step
is church says. Everybody call the numbers.
Yeah, because the
and
city
be persistent that y'all want this project.
Yeah, because the city council.
Because we need to get another vote. We have to get 4 votes, right? And the sooner the better, because at some point,
For a super.
Yeah, super majority.